John, please take one.
I'm Nick Jones. I'm a cellist. I'm also very much a teacher, and I'm head of strings at Cheetham School of Music, as well as teaching in the Royal Northern College of Music, where I met your distinguished artistic director, Alex McQuiston, who was one of my students. My life has taken it took me sort of strange ways to get there. I was brought up in rural Wales, sort of a very remote farm away from most people, and we had a grandmother of mine living with us who played the piano, and so there's always music going on. She was always playing to us, and I think I started learning piano a little bit from her when I was quite young. And then when I was 8, my father took it upon himself to teach me the violin on his old full-size violin, which you can imagine wasn't exactly ideal for an 8-year-old. But nevertheless, I got as far as playing Handel's sonata in E major, and then suddenly an uncle of mine decided to he told me I was playing the violin and decided to send us a smaller violin, which of course sounded disappointing, but also I had a younger sister who picked it up and immediately looked just like a violinist, and I thought, this is probably not the best thing to continue doing. And luckily there was a very good cello teacher around, and I took to the cello, and I thought cello was just really my instrument, and I never looked back. I've never stopped loving playing the cello since then. So that was when I was about 10 years old. When I was 16, I started studying with Joan Dixon, a great Scottish cellist and teacher, and actually I had a year with her in the Royal Scottish Academy of Music and Drama, and then I transferred to the International Cellist with another great cello teacher and Scottish cellist, Jane Cowan, also the teacher of people like David Wharton with the Endelian Quartet and Stephen Islis, and many of the people who play on period cellos, because she really believed in gut strings, although I have slightly sort of moved away from those in the last few years. It was very stimulating because we didn't just study the cello, we had to study history from the time of the Greeks to the present day. Usually about 12 of us there at one time, and 6 of us had to research something to do with politics or architecture or art or history, and some of the other 6 had to research something musical through that same period. So that went over a 3-year cycle. You just joined whenever you happened to join. So you might have joined in the 20th century, you might have joined in ancient Greece and Pythagoras discovering about perfect fifths and octaves and all that kind of thing. We also had to study French and German. We had to read Goethe's Faust painstakingly week by week. We had to read Racine, and on Sunday afternoons, if the weather was nice, we sent us out in the garden to try and memorize some of the poems that Schubert and Schumann set to music. So it was very holistic and spiritual in a way, I suppose. Suddenly, I needed to buy a decent cello, and as I was oldest of 7 children from a remote Welsh farm, there wasn't exactly money swimming around to buy an expensive cello. So I ended up going down to Cornwall to take up a teaching job, which I thought would just get me a loan, but then Cornwall was so beautiful that I got involved there. I conducted a male voice choir and a Gilbert and Sullivan Society and a youth orchestra before deciding, actually, hang on a second, I want to play the cello, so I must I must leave this beautiful, beautiful county of Cornwall, and then moved to Wales, where I started various festivals and concert series, and started playing recitals and chamber music. Stupidly, sort of, or maybe quite innovatively, suddenly decided I was going to give a pastoral recital, and all kinds of things began to happen in the way of chamber music. I formed the Johannes Piano Trio with Michael Bachmann, who just left the Bachmann Quartet, and then we reformed the Bachmann Quartet, which I played in for 10 years. So that was an amazing period, really playing this just fabulous, fabulous repertoire. And we were luckily all principals of the English String Orchestra, which then gave me this great opportunity to spend years working with Menuhin, because he was our principal guest conductor who took us all over the place, and to America, all over Europe, even to the Berlin Philharmonic Hall. So some amazing formative times. And then suddenly the Chet's job came up and I moved to Manchester in 1996. Teaching's always been a really important part of my life. In fact, unbeknownst to the academy as it was then in Glasgow, I had my first teaching job in a private school at the age of 17, teaching cello for a day a week. And then at the cello centre, Jane Cowan had some of us working with young students who came in on Saturdays. So we were kind of assisting her in teaching these young cellists. Somehow for me, teaching the cello and playing the cello are very much two things which inform each other. For me, if I don't carry on playing, I find that my teaching is not as vibrant and as, I hope, inspiring. On the other hand, I find that working with young musicians, getting to know them, getting to know how they hear music, finding ways for them in order to find their voice, to find their way of working, to discover the discipline it takes to become a musician, all these various things, they all seem to inform my own musicianship, and I feel the two are totally harmonious, certainly in my life, and I can't imagine not teaching and I can't imagine not playing the cello. Teaching gives me an incredible amount of joy, and I guess it's the thing that you learn so much about as the years go by. You perhaps start with some very strong ideas and you're very passionate, you put those ideas across as a younger teacher, and then gradually, as you get more experience, you get the confidence to, say in a master class, go in with a completely blank mind and listen to the person play, and as they play, try to discover something about them, and when they've stopped playing, start a conversation with them without any preconceived ideas, just finding ways that you can communicate together, and then finding ways that perhaps you can help them to be even more what they want to be. Because I suppose the longer that you are involved in musical life, the more you realize that there are very few things which are wrong. Perhaps we prefer things to be in tune, of course. We like a good sense of pulse, but there are so many ways to phrase, there are so many ways to create a sound, there are so many ways to shape music. And the more I have the confidence to want people to discover something for themselves and not tell them that anything that they're doing is wrong in any kind of way, but actually celebrate it and enjoy it and find what is wonderful about it, the more I'm able to help them be creative, if that makes any sense to your viewers. This pandemic has really made a lot of musicians think very differently about their lives and about how they make music. And like this concert series which we're involved with now, find different ways of performing, different ways of promoting music, different ways of making music available to audiences. But I think at the same time, it's come at a time when already the musical world has been shifting, looking at itself, and people have been perhaps a bit more experimental. And I suppose if I look back over the last few decades, perhaps the influence of world music, of jazz, people doing crossover. I'm thinking of Ravi Shankar. I listened to a wonderful program recently with him, and also went straight away and looked up the amazing videos of him and Yehudi Menuhin performing together. But up in Scotland here, this wonderful young harpist, Fiona Mackay, who started as a classical harpist actually studied in Manchester, and now is making a wonderful career as a folk harpist, but using a lot of the classical skills which she had in the first place. And of course, we're moving into a sort of digital age. I subscribe to the Berlin Philharmonic's digital concert hall, and so I can go and listen to any concerts that they've given over the last 15 years or so together, and they send me their program for the year and I can dip into that. I think in all kinds of ways, musicians are thinking very creatively about the future, and I think the future that our current students will go into will be quite different from the one which perhaps, or certainly more different from the one that I went into a few decades ago, where there seemed to be quite clear pathways in, if you were lucky enough to be a chamber musician, as I was, playing in all the various music societies around the country, doing some BBC Radio 3 broadcasts, making some CDs, one could actually make a living doing that. Now, people are having to be so much more creative about how they promote themselves and how they make their livings as musicians. And I think I'm encouraging people to be very, very flexible, to take every opportunity they get given, so that when they see themselves being asked to do a contemporary music project, don't say, oh no, all this difficult stuff to learn. Actually embrace it. Get really involved in it. If you're asked to play an opera, get involved in that. If you're asked to play for the conductor's class, having to suddenly get to know a whole lot of symphonies very quickly and you're just 1 2 apart, take every single possible opportunity that you get. Because actually I think for our young musicians now, it's being flexible and adaptable and inquisitive which will actually stand them in really good stead for the future. They have what they call portfolio careers with many different aspects to their careers. So that will be something which I think has changed quite a bit over the last few years. If I was talking to, as I do frequently, to young musicians now, I would say it's probably one of the most demanding careers that you could go into. It's also a career where you really can't afford to waste your time. If you really have to study whilst you're a child, you have to work pretty hard, and when you go to a conservatoire, you really can't be the student who has the first couple of years partying and then takes it seriously in the last 2 years. There is no time to lose. There is so much for us to learn. And I think you have to look after yourself very well. So that means you need to be fit, you need to be healthy, you need to exercise, you need to sleep, and you need to all the time be finding ways that you can develop your artistry and your creativity, whether that's by going on a holiday in Italy and looking at amazing frescoes and going to see David in Florence, or whether it's traveling through France and seeing some of the countryside of the Impressionists, going to Vienna and seeing the graveyard where all the great composers are buried and seeing some of the places where they performed. whether it's reading, whether it's going out into nature, as Brahms did, for instance. I had a wonderful holiday recently in Thun, and you know that Brahms used to go across Lake Thun and stay where he could see the Jungfrau and the Munch and the Eiger to get his inspiration. It's where he wrote the A major violin sonata. So I think taking everything you possibly can into yourself, which then feeds your artistry, and realize that it is about you being a creative artist and being a wide and wise and deep-thinking person in order to become a good musician. So I think I would advise young musicians that it's an amazing life. It's incredibly hard work, but I can't imagine anything more rewarding than what I've been lucky enough to do over the last few decades.